The teacup shattered against the hardwood floor, porcelain fragments scattering like my world was about to. My heart hammered against my ribs as I pressed my trembling body against the hallway wall, my arthritic fingers white-knuckled around the doorframe. The words I'd just overheard replayed in my mind, each syllable a dagger to my heart. "She won't fight anything once we have the death certificate." My daughter Diane's voice was clinically cold, devoid of any emotion. "The house, her accounts, everything, transfers immediately. We just need to find the right doctor willing to expedite things." My own children, the ones I'd raised, sacrificed for, loved unconditionally, were plotting my death. "Mother, is that you? Are you confused again?" Diane called out, her voice instantly transforming into sugary concern as she heard the crash. But the mask had slipped. I'd seen the monster beneath. Blood roared in my ears as I stumbled backward. 3 months of forgetfulness accusations, doctor's appointments where they spoke over me, financial documents mysteriously altered. The pieces suddenly locked into horrifying place. They weren't concerned about my health. They wanted my $1.2 million Victorian home. "Coming, dear," I called back, my voice somehow steady despite the earthquake inside me. I wiped my eyes, straightened my cardigan, and made a split-second decision. I wouldn't confront them. Not yet. First, I needed proof. The recording device, still nestled in my pocket, felt suddenly heavy with purpose. What I would do with that evidence would destroy the family I thought I had, but save my life. Before I reveal how I turned their dismissal into their downfall. Subscribe to Her Silver Truth for daily stories where elderly wisdom proves more powerful than anyone expected. Looking back now, I can see all the warning signs I missed. The subtle changes in how they treated me began the day after that development company sent their offer letter. What my children saw as a golden opportunity, I recognized as an attempt to erase 60 years of memories. The Victorian home on Maplewick Drive where I had raised my children, nursed my husband through his final illness, and created holiday memories for 54 years became the very place where I would uncover a betrayal so profound it still takes my breath away. My name is Mildred Calloway. I'm 82 years old, and this is how I uncovered my children's plot to declare me mentally incompetent, fake my death certificate, and steal everything I've spent a lifetime building. What happened next will show you why the elderly are the most dangerous opponents you'll ever face. We have nothing left to lose and decades of wisdom they never saw coming. For 54 years, I'd kept my children's births, birthdays, graduations, and weddings meticulously documented in leather-bound journals. Never once did I imagine I'd need to document their betrayal to save my own life. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand the depths of what they planned and how spectacularly it backfired, you need to know how it all began. 3 months earlier, my life had seemed so ordinary. After Stanley died, I'd settled into a comfortable routine. I'd wake at 6:15 a.m., precisely when I'd risen during my 33-year career as head librarian at Riverside Municipal Library. I'd organise my daily medications, metformin for type 2 diabetes, 212 monthly, losartan for hypertension, 175s, and meloxicam for the arthritis that made my fingers swell like sausages whenever rain approached. "Going to be a wet one today," I murmured that fateful Tuesday morning to Fitzgerald, my orange tabby, as I massaged my knuckles. The cat, named after my favourite author, purred agreement from his perch on the window seat, overlooking Maplewick Drive. Stanley and I had purchased our Victorian home in 1971 for $24,005. A tremendous stretch for a librarian and an assistant district attorney back then. We'd saved every penny, clipping coupons and foregoing vacations for 5 years to afford the down payment. For over 5 decades, I'd polished its oak banisters, tended its garden, and preserved its stained glass windows. Now, property values had skyrocketed due to gentrification, and our modest investment was worth $1.2 million. My Social Security check, $1,137 each month, covered my basic expenses, while Stanley's pension added another $1,000. Not wealthy by any means, but enough to maintain my independence. The greatest luxury was not worrying about money after decades of careful planning through recessions and inflationary periods that had wiped out many of our friends' savings. I'd spent the morning organising my recipe box, 300 index cards in Stanley's handwriting. He'd been the cook in our family, and after his death from pulmonary fibrosis 3 years earlier, I'd taught myself his specialties. That day I was planning to attempt his beef bourguignon, the dish he'd made for every anniversary dinner for 47 years. The recipe reminded me of our 40th anniversary, how Stanley had surprised me with tickets to Paris, our first trip abroad. We'd walked the Seine, visited Shakespeare and Company bookstore, and dined at a tiny bistro where the chef had complimented Stanley's French. I remembered how proudly he'd ordered for both of us, his high school French remarkably intact after decades of disuse. That night, back in our small hotel room, we'd shared a bottle of Bordeaux and reminisced about our first apartment. A one-bedroom walk-up with unreliable heat, but a view of the park where we'd walked every Sunday for 2 years. Those memories were embedded in the very walls of our Victorian home. Each room held decades of family history. The living room where Warren had taken his first steps, the dining room where Diane had announced her college acceptance, the study where Stanley had prepared his most challenging cases. The morning mail contained something unusual that day, a formal envelope from Westridge Development Group offering to purchase my home for $1.5 million cash. I set it aside on the kitchen table, thinking little of it. I had no intention of selling the home where I'd raised Diane and Warren, nursed Stanley through his final battle with pulmonary fibrosis, and created decades of memories. The doorbell rang at precisely 10:43 a.m. Diane stood on the porch, an unexpected Thursday visit. Behind her gleaming smile, something sharp lurked in her eyes. "Mother, I was just in the neighbourhood after Pilates and thought I'd drop by." She glided past me, designer perfume lingering in her wake. Her gaze immediately landed on the development letter. "What's this?" "Just another offer for the house," I said, putting on the kettle. "Third one this year. 1.5 million. Her voice changed, a subtle shift I should have recognised. "That's significant money, Mother." "It's just a house to them," I replied. "To me, it's home." I remembered how Stanley and I had scrimped and saved during the crushing 18% interest rates of the early 1980s, somehow managing to pay for Warren's medical school tuition while helping Diane establish her interior design business. The house represented not just its market value, but the thousands of family dinners, Christmas mornings, and quiet evenings Stanley and I had shared reading by the fireplace. Diane stayed only 15 minutes, unusually brief for her weekly visits. As she left, I noticed her taking a second look at the development letter, her fingers lingering on the $1.5 million figure. It seemed insignificant then, just a daughter's curiosity. Looking back, that was the moment everything changed. The moment my daughter began to see me not as her mother, but as an obstacle between her and $1.5 million. The following week brought the first incident. Diane arrived with Warren in tow, unusual for a weekday when he should have been at his medical practice. "You left the stove on yesterday," Warren stated without greeting me. "No, I didn't," I replied, genuinely confused. "Yes, Mother, you did." Diane spoke slowly and loudly as if addressing a child. "I came by after my Pilates class and the burner was on. The kettle was bone dry. You could have burned the house down." "That's impossible," I explained. "I use the electric kettle now. The stovetop one has been packed away since your father died." They exchanged a look, the kind that passes between conspirators. "See?" Warren said softly to his sister. "She doesn't remember." An icy feeling crawled up my spine. Stanley's antique kettle had been his favourite wedding gift from 1965. After his funeral, I couldn't bear to use it. Diane herself had helped me wrap it in tissue paper and place it in the cedar chest in the attic. She knew I hadn't used it. She was lying. But why? The incident reminded me of a similar moment decades earlier. When Warren was 17, he'd broken curfew and claimed he'd told me he would be late. It was the same tone, the same calculated deception. Back then, I'd attributed it to teenage rebellion. Now, I wondered if I'd been seeing glimpses of his true character all along. I recalled how, even as a child, Diane had been jealous of others' possessions: her cousin's new bicycle, her friend's vacation home, her college roommate's trust fund. She'd always wanted more than we could provide, despite our best efforts. Was this simply the culmination of lifelong avarice? That night, after they left, I pulled out my burgundy leather journal, one of 32 identical volumes I'd kept since my wedding day. My handwriting, still precise despite arthritis, recorded every detail of the strange conversation, ending with deliberate deception. Watch carefully. The incidents multiplied with alarming speed. Within 2 weeks, Warren had scheduled me for a cognitive assessment with Dr. Jenkins. Suddenly, both children insisted on accompanying me to every medical appointment. "She's been having memory lapses," Diane told the doctor before I could speak. "Last week she couldn't remember Aunt Prudy's husband's name." "Because Prudence never married," I corrected, maintaining composure despite the blatant lie. "She was engaged to Raymond Fielding in 1973, but he took a teaching position in Switzerland, and she refused to leave grandmother." Warren sighed dramatically. "You're confusing Aunt Prudy with Great Aunt Temperance again. This is exactly what we're talking about." My heart pounded. My mother's sister Prudence had indeed never married. Temperance was my grandmother's name, a family history I'd recounted countless times at holiday gatherings. They weren't confused, they were gaslighting me. "Mrs. Calloway," Dr. Jenkins said, examining me, "your son and daughter have reported concerning episodes, but your cognitive responses seem perfectly normal today." Before I could respond, Diane interjected smoothly. "Mother's good at compensating. Tell him about the stove incident, Warren." As Warren recounted the fabricated story, I watched Dr. Jenkins' notes change, his pen scratched inconsistent presentation beside my perfect cognitive test results. He'd been our family physician for 15 years. He'd attended Stanley's funeral. Yet he seemed to be accepting their version of reality over mine. I thought of how often I'd comforted these children through nightmares, how I'd stretched our budget to afford Warren's medical school application fees and Diane's study abroad semester in Paris. I remembered reading bedtime stories for years, teaching them to ride bicycles in the park, helping them with homework at the kitchen table. Now they were engineering my erasure with the same methodical precision. The campaign intensified with breathtaking efficiency. At Sunday dinner, I found myself relegated to a side chair after 54 years at the head of my own table. When I mentioned recent local politics, a rezoning issue I'd been following for months, Diane patted my hand condescendingly. "Let's not worry about complicated things, Mother. You've been getting so confused lately." The humiliation burned through me like acid, but I masked it with a placid smile. I'd taught English literature to college students for 3 decades. I'd managed a library budget of $2.3 million. I'd organised fundraising campaigns that saved 3 historic buildings in our town. Yet suddenly I was deemed incapable of understanding basic civic issues. That's when I began noticing the pattern. My granddaughter Amanda's ballet recital. This is my mother. "We have to watch her closely these days," Warren told another parent within my hearing. "My carefully organised medication system. Mrs. Calloway, your son mentioned you're having trouble managing your medications," my pharmacist called. "He's requested we deliver them pre-sorted in daily dosage containers. There will be an additional $45 monthly fee." My financial independence. My checkbook showed a $400 withdrawal I had never made. My thermostat was turned to 80 degrees, something I never did because of my blood pressure medication. My favourite cardigan disappeared from my closet, only to be found by Diane in the garden shed where I would never have left it. Each incident, taken alone, could be dismissed as a misunderstanding. Together they formed a pattern of coordinated manipulation designed to create a paper trail of mental decline. The most painful episode occurred during my weekly bridge game. For 30 years, I'd hosted 3 friends, Irene, Martha, and Louise, every Thursday afternoon. Suddenly, Diane began dropping by during these gatherings, ostensibly to bring snacks or check on me, but I noticed how she watched my gameplay, waiting for any mistake. During one hand, I momentarily miscalculated my partner's bid. A simple error anyone might make. Diane immediately pounced. "See what I mean?" she said to my friends. "These little confusions are happening more frequently." The room grew uncomfortably silent. These women had known me for decades, through marriages, children, grandchildren, retirement. They'd witnessed my organizational skills throughout my career. They knew me. "Actually," Louise said firmly, meeting Diane's gaze, "your mother plays better bridge than any of us, always has. One missed bid doesn't indicate anything except that we're playing a challenging hand." I could have kissed her. The look on Diane's face, surprise followed by poorly concealed annoyance, confirmed my suspicions. She'd expected my friends to validate her narrative. Instead, they'd formed a protective circle around me. Later, as they were leaving, Irene squeezed my hand meaningfully. "Call me later," she whispered. "Something's not right here." Then my attorney Walter Simmons called. "Mildred, your son contacted us about reviewing your will. Said you were having memory issues and wanted to simplify your affairs." "Walter, I did not request any review." The silence on the line stretched for 3 uncomfortable seconds. "That's concerning." Walter had been Stanley's colleague at the district attorney's office before starting his own practice. He'd helped us draft our wills 30 years ago and had updated them after Stanley's passing. He knew me well enough to recognize the implications of Warren's request. "Mildred, let me look into something. Don't sign anything until we speak again," he said, his voice deliberately casual. "And perhaps it might be wise to keep notes about any unusual interactions." The systematic dismantling of my autonomy culminated at a family gathering at Diane's home. As relatives shared memories, I noticed something disturbing. Every family tradition I had created was being attributed to Stanley. The Christmas cookies from my grandmother's recipe were suddenly Dad's special cookies. The Easter egg hunt rules I'd designed were something Dad always insisted on. When I gently corrected this revisionist history, Warren laughed loudly enough to draw everyone's attention. "Mum's memory is playing tricks again. Dad was always the holiday planner. Remember how Mum would get confused about which dishes went where? My grandchildren looked at me with pity. My great-grandchildren absorbed a false history, one where my contributions had been systematically erased. The only exception was Amanda, my eldest granddaughter, who frowned slightly at her father's version of events. Later, she squeezed my hand and whispered, "I remember, Grandma. You taught me how to make those cookies when I was 7. That small moment of recognition nearly brought me to tears." Later that evening, I overheard Warren telling his wife we need to start looking at memory care facilities. She can't distinguish between what actually happened and what she thinks happened anymore. I had never felt so invisible or so terrified. They weren't just dismissing me. They were methodically destroying my identity, my autonomy, and my credibility. That night, I couldn't sleep. The betrayal cut too deep. The children I had sacrificed for, Warren's medical school tuition during the crushing 18% interest rates of the early 1980s, Diane's interior design business startup, now viewed me as an inconvenient obstacle to their inheritance. I remembered Diane's birth. 38 hours of labor, followed by the indescribable joy of holding her for the first time. I recalled Warren's kindergarten graduation, how proud he'd been in his little paper cap. I thought of the thousands of dinners I'd prepared, the late nights helping with science projects, the school meetings, the orthodontist appointments, the driving lessons, the endless invisible labor of motherhood that had shaped my entire adult life. I remembered when Warren broke his arm at 12, how I'd stayed beside his hospital bed for 2 days, reading his favorite books aloud to distract him from the pain. I thought of the summer Diane's first serious boyfriend broke her heart, how I'd held her for hours as she sobbed, assuring her that heartbreak, though painful, would eventually heal. I recalled the countless sacrifices Stanley and I had made, foregoing new clothes, delaying home repairs, driving old cars, to ensure our children had every opportunity we could provide. Dance lessons, science camps, college application fees, down payment assistance for first homes, interest-free loans for business ventures. Thousands of little and large generosities that parents offer without expectation of repayment. And now, they were conspiring to erase me. At 3:17 a.m., shaking with a mixture of fear and resolve, I called the one person I knew would never lie to me, Irene Goldberg, my friend of 50 years who had retired as nursing supervisor at Riverside General. "Irene, I need your honesty," I whispered into the phone. "Am I losing my faculties?" "Mildred Calloway, you're sharper than half the doctors I supervised," Irene declared without hesitation. "What's this about?" I explained everything. The fabricated incidents, the missing prescription, the financial irregularities, the constant insistence that I was confused. The line went quiet. Then Irene spoke, her voice uncharacteristically grave. "Listen carefully. There's been a disturbing trend lately. Elder financial exploitation has gotten sophisticated. The Cranston family on Sycamore, their daughter had Mrs. Cranston declared incompetent, emptied her accounts, and had her in Shady Pines within 6 weeks. All perfectly legal once she had power of attorney." "But why the rush in my case?" I asked, hands trembling as I clutched the phone. "I'm in relatively good health." "Anyone showing interest in your property recently? Developers? The city?" The realization hit me like a physical blow. The Westridge development letter offering $1.5 million, Diane's sudden interest, the house she'd always coveted but couldn't afford on her interior decorator's income. In that moment, the disparate puzzle pieces snapped into place with sickening clarity. The fabricated incidents of confusion, the constant undermining, the attempts to isolate me from friends and professionals who knew me well, all to get their hands on my property. "Irene," I whispered, my voice steady despite my racing heart, "I need your help." "I'll be there at 9 tomorrow," she replied without hesitation. "Say it's Bridge Club Day. Don't let them know we've spoken." That night, I lay awake, cataloguing every suspicious incident of the past 3 months. The picture that emerged was so calculated, so cold, that I could scarcely reconcile it with the children I thought I knew. Had they always been this way? Or had greed transformed them? Had I somehow failed as a mother to instill basic human decency? I thought of Stanley, how devastated he would be to see what our children had become. He'd been so proud of them. Warren following him into medicine instead of law, Diane inheriting his eye for design. What would he say now, seeing them conspire against me? The thought of his disappointment was almost as painful as the betrayal itself. 2 days later, under the guise of our weekly bridge game with Martha and Louise, Irene arrived with something tucked discreetly in her purse, a digital recorder no larger than a fountain pen. "Latest technology," she explained, demonstrating its operation. "My grandson uses these for lectures at Harvard Law, records for 6 hours on a single charge." Martha, who had been my neighbour for 40 years, reached across the card table and squeezed my hand. "We're with you, Mildred." "Whatever you need." Louise, who'd been my assistant at the library before her retirement, nodded firmly. "No one messes with one of us without dealing with all of us." Their support fortified me. That night I installed a small Yale lock on my bedroom door and moved my journals from the glass-fronted bookcase to the hidden compartment behind my wardrobe, the one Stanley had built during a sensitive racketeering case in 1982. For the next 3 weeks, I became a spy in my own home. The recorder captured Diane and Warren's whispered conversations when they thought I was napping. "Dr. Jenkins is on board now. 2 more episodes, and we can file the competency papers. The sooner we get her into Champlin Gardens, the faster we can list the property. She's so stubborn about those damn journals. We need to find them all and remove them before the hearing. The developer has already agreed to the terms. We just need to complete the paperwork once we have power of attorney. The recordings revealed more than just their scheme. They exposed the rot at the core of my children's characters, their casual cruelty, their transparent greed, their complete lack of remorse. They discussed my cognitive decline, not with concern, but with impatience. They spoke of my home not as their childhood refuge, but as an asset to be liquidated. They referenced my decades of meticulous journaling, not with respect, but with frustration that it might impede their plans. I recorded Dr. Jenkins' next examination, catching Diane whispering, "Just write down early dementia, and we can move forward." I photographed my meticulously organised medication system with dated newspapers alongside. I made copies of every financial document, storing them with Walter Simmons and in a safe deposit box only Irene could access. Walter, meanwhile, had been conducting his own investigation. He discovered that Warren had made inquiries about involuntary commitment procedures. Diane had contacted 3 separate real estate agents about listing my home. Most disturbingly, she had spoken with a document preparation service about death certificates. "This goes beyond financial exploitation," Walter told me gravely during a clandestine meeting at his office. "They're potentially planning something far more sinister." The most difficult part was maintaining the charade, nodding placidly when they spoke to me as if I were a child, appearing forgetful when convenient, feigning ignorance of their plans. Every condescending pat on the hand, every whispered, "She's getting worse." Each financial document they thought I wouldn't notice. I documented it all with the precision of the librarian I'd been for decades. The psychological toll was immense. I lost weight. I developed insomnia. I jumped at unexpected sounds. The constant vigilance, the need to appear vulnerable while remaining hyper-aware, exhausted me physically and emotionally. One evening, as I pretended to doze in my armchair, I heard Diane on the phone with her husband. "David, we've been over this. Once we have the property, all our problems are solved. The IRS debt, the credit cards, everything. I can't stop now." A pause. "Look, she's 82. How many good years does she have left anyway? We're just accelerating the inevitable." Another pause, longer this time. "Don't you dare get moral on me now. You had no problem spending that money when it was coming in. If you can't support me in this, then just stay out of my way." Her callousness shocked me even after everything I'd uncovered. To speak of my death, of accelerating the inevitable, with such clinical detachment, to reduce my life to an inconvenient delay in her financial plans. "She seems to be accepting the idea of Champlin Gardens," Warren told Diane over coffee one morning, as I pretended to struggle with the daily crossword I'd already completed. "I think she's finally realizing she can't manage on her own anymore." "Thank God," Diane replied, stirring her coffee. "I've already selected which of her furniture pieces I want. That Chippendale secretary desk would look perfect in my foyer." I bit my tongue until I tasted blood, continuing to pencil in answers I'd known for minutes. They were already dividing my possessions while I sat 3 feet away. The Chippendale desk had been Stanley's wedding gift to me on our 40th anniversary. He'd saved for 2 years to afford it. What they didn't realise was that I was managing something far more complex than they could imagine, the systematic construction of their downfall. The final phase of my plan required careful timing. I needed irrefutable evidence of their intentions, evidence no judge could dismiss. After consulting with Walter Simmons, I set the trap. "I've been thinking about what you said," I told my children over the phone, deliberately making my voice quaver. "Perhaps Champlin Gardens would be simpler. I found some paperwork I don't quite understand in Stanley's old files. Insurance policies, I think. Could you both come review them tomorrow?" They agreed so quickly I could almost hear their greedy smiles through the phone. As I hung up, a wave of grief washed over me. These were my children. The babies I'd rocked through. Croup and colic. The teenagers whose heartbreaks I'd soothed. The adults whose dreams I'd helped fund. Now they viewed me as nothing more than an obstacle to $1.5 million. That night I barely slept. I rehearsed my role. The confused elderly mother finally acquiescing to her children's concern. I checked and rechecked the recording devices. I packed an emergency bag with medications, clothing, and essential documents, hiding it behind my bedroom door. I spoke with Irene, confirming I could stay with her daughter if necessary. The stakes couldn't have been higher. If my plan failed, if they discovered the recorders, if they realized I was onto them, I had no doubt they would accelerate their timeline. The conversation about expediting my death certificate haunted me. Were they capable of actual violence? Just weeks earlier, I would have dismissed the notion as absurd. Now, I wasn't certain. I gave them one last chance the next morning. When they arrived, I looked each of them in the eyes and said, "Before we look at these papers, I want you both to know that I value honesty above all else. If there's anything you want to tell me, anything at all, now would be the time." Diane's smile never reached her eyes. "We just want what's best for you, Mother," Warren nodded. "That's all this has ever been about." Their choice was made. I led them to Stanley's old study where 3 hidden recording devices waited. "These documents are in the red folder on the desk. I'll make us some tea." In the kitchen, I activated the surveillance system Stanley had installed decades ago, then moved silently to my position in the hallway, teacup trembling slightly in my hand. The familiar weight of the recorder pressed against my chest in my cardigan pocket. What I heard next would haunt me forever. "It's perfect, Warren," Diane's voice came through with chilling clarity. "Once we have her declared mentally incompetent, we can get power of attorney. Then it's just a matter of time. Dr. Jenkins already thinks she's showing signs of dementia. But what if she fights it?" Warren sounded nervous. "You know how she keeps those damn journals. 30 years of meticulous records, dates, conversations. She even recorded our last phone call." "She won't fight anything once we have the death certificate." The cold calculation in my daughter's voice froze the blood in my veins. "The house, her accounts, everything transfers immediately. We just need to find the right doctor willing to expedite things." "Jesus, Diane." Warren's voice dropped even lower. "Are you talking about—" "I'm talking about doing what needs to be done," she interrupted. "The developer won't wait forever, and I need that money. My business is underwater. David's threatening divorce, and the IRS audit is just the beginning of my problems." "But this is Mother we're talking about." "This is $1.5 million we're talking about," Diane snapped. "Half of which is yours if you don't lose your nerve. What's Mother going to do with it anyway? Drift along for another decade, wasting away in this mausoleum? We're doing her a favor." Death certificate. The words echoed in my mind, surreal and terrifying. My own children weren't just planning to strip me of my autonomy, they were discussing ways to falsify my death. Or perhaps worse. The teacup slipped from my fingers, shattering against the hardwood floor. The very scene that opened our story. "Mother, is that you? Are you confused again?" Diane called out, her voice instantly transforming into artificial concern. But I was already moving, adrenaline overriding arthritis, as I grabbed my emergency bag, prepared weeks ago on Irene's advice, and headed for the front door. Behind me, I heard them rushing from the study, footsteps rapid on the stairs. "Mother, where are you going?" Warren's voice held an edge of panic as I reached for the doorknob. I turned, meeting their eyes one last time. In Diane's, I saw calculation, already formulating how to spin this to Dr. Jenkins. In Warren's, fear. The dawning realization that they might have been recorded. "I'm going out," I said simply, my voice steadier than it had any right to be. "Don't wait up." I closed the door behind me, walked calmly down the porch steps, and got into the waiting taxi I'd pre-scheduled that morning. "Oakwood Apartments, please," I told the driver, giving him Irene's daughter's address. The moment the taxi turned the corner, I activated the emergency plan I'd spent weeks constructing. One phone call set 6 simultaneous actions in motion. Walter Simmons, filed emergency court motions with the recordings as evidence. Irene Goldberg submitted documentation to Elder Protective Services. Detective Victor Ramirez, Stanley's protégé from his district attorney days, opened an official police investigation. Dr. Jenkins received copies of the recordings in which my children manipulated his medical findings. The falsified power of attorney document was seized during a warranted search of Diane's home office. Their respective spouses received copies of all recordings and evidence. The next 2 weeks unfolded with the inexorable precision of justice. While my children frantically searched for me, placing missing person reports that heightened police scrutiny of their activities, I watched the fruits of my meticulous planning from the safety of Irene's daughter's guest house. The investigators found far more than I had anticipated. Diane's financial problems weren't just business troubles. She'd been embezzling from clients for years, using their deposits to fund a lifestyle she couldn't afford. Warren's medical license was already under review for prescribing irregularities. They had accumulated gambling debts, tax liens, and a web of financial malfeasance that explained their desperate grab for my property. More shocking still was the discovery in Diane's home safe. A completed death certificate with my name on it, cause of death listed as natural causes, and a forged doctor's signature. She had already begun the process of claiming I was deceased while I was very much alive. The investigation also uncovered emails between my children discussing various methods to ensure my rapid decline once I was in the memory care facility. References to medication adjustments, deliberate isolation from friends, and systematic gaslighting to accelerate cognitive deterioration. Their plan wasn't just to declare me incompetent, it was to ensure I became incompetent through calculated mistreatment. When we finally met again, it was in a courtroom. I walked in with my spine straight, dressed in the navy suit I'd worn to my retirement party. Diane and Warren sat at the defendant's table, facing charges of attempted elder abuse, conspiracy to commit fraud, forgery, and attempted exploitation. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, listened to the recordings, examined my journals, and reviewed the falsified power of attorney document they'd prepared with my forged signature. When the recording of Diane discussing my death certificate played, audible gasps echoed through the courtroom. The district attorney was already discussing adding attempted murder conspiracy charges. "Your Honor," the prosecutor said, "the premeditation evident in these recordings suggests this was more than simple financial exploitation. The defendants deliberately created false medical evidence, isolated the victim, and planned to benefit from her supposedly natural death, all while she was in good health. For each betrayal, justice delivered a symmetrical consequence." Warren's medical license was suspended pending review for his manipulation of my prescriptions. Diane's interior design business faced tax audits after financial irregularities surfaced. The falsified power of attorney triggered forgery charges. Their attempts to isolate me backfired spectacularly as community members came forward with stories of my ongoing volunteer work, sharp memory, and organisational skills. My bridge club arrived en masse, filling an entire row of the courtroom in silent support. Former library colleagues submitted sworn statements about my organisational abilities and mental acuity. Even our mail carrier testified about my perfect recollection of which magazines were due which week. Most powerfully, my granddaughter Amanda took the stand. My grandmother recited Wordsworth's Tintern Abbey from memory at my college graduation last month, she testified, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. She manages her own finances, volunteers twice weekly, and remembers details about my life that I sometimes forget. The idea that she's cognitively impaired is not just wrong, it's a deliberate lie. She turned toward her father, her voice breaking slightly. "Dad, how could you do this? She taught you to read. She worked extra shifts at the library to pay for your medical school applications." Warren couldn't meet her eyes. The judge granted an immediate protective order. I watched expressions shift on my children's faces as they realized the magnitude of what they'd lost. Diane's husband filed for divorce within days. Warren's wife took their children to her parents' home in Oregon. Their carefully cultivated social standing evaporated as the local newspaper covered the case. During a court recess, Diane approached me in the hallway, her designer outfit exchanged for subdued courthouse attire. Gone was the saccharine smile replaced by naked hostility. "You always were too clever," she hissed. "If you'd just played your role and acted like a proper senile old woman, everyone would have been better off." I straightened my spine, looking directly into the eyes of the daughter I no longer recognized. "That's where you're wrong," I replied, my voice level. "I kept perfect records my entire life. Your father taught me that memory fades, but ink doesn't, and neither does digital audio." She started to respond, but the bailiff moved between us. As they led her away, I saw something I hadn't expected. Not remorse, but calculation. She was already planning her next move, even as the consequences of this one unfolded around her. The criminal trial that followed made regional headlines. Elderly mother outsmarts children's death certificate plot. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. The judge, citing the calculated cruelty of their actions, sentenced both to 7 years in state prison. The court finds particularly reprehensible the defendant's manipulation of medical professionals and exploitation of ageist assumptions, she stated during sentencing. This case represents one of the most egregious examples of elder abuse this court has encountered. What would you have done if someone tried to erase your contributions or question your competence? Has anyone ever underestimated you because of your age, only to regret it later? Share your experiences in the comments below. Our community values your wisdom. 6 months later, the regulator clock in my entryway, a wedding gift from Stanley's parents in 1965, chimed 6 times as I settled into my favourite armchair, watching Emma toddle among the daylilies in my garden. My Victorian home remained mine, now with a sophisticated security system and regular visits from neighbours who had rallied around me after the story broke. "How are you feeling today, Grandma?" Amanda asked, adjusting the cushion behind my back. After cutting ties with her father, she and Emma had moved into my garden apartment while she completed her pharmacy degree. "Like justice has been served," I replied, smiling as Emma discovered a ladybug with exaggerated delight. But the truth was more complicated. The victory felt hollow in many ways. I had won, but also lost irreparably. The children I had raised were revealed as strangers. The family I thought I had was permanently fractured. Some nights I still woke in cold sweats, hearing Diane's clinical discussion of my death certificate. Yet something unexpected had emerged from the wreckage of betrayal. The outcome of my ordeal became something I never anticipated. A foundation. The settlement from my civil suit against my children funded the Callaway Elder Protection Foundation, providing free legal assistance to seniors facing exploitation. We train medical professionals to recognize manufactured incompetence claims and help elderly individuals document their lives to preserve their autonomy. The foundation began in my living room with 3 volunteers. Now, 6 months later, we have an office downtown, a staff of 8, and a waiting list of elderly clients seeking help. We've already prevented 7 cases of financial exploitation and helped secure justice in dozens more. I returned to volunteer work at the library with renewed purpose. Our program teaching seniors to document their life stories now has a 3-month waiting list. My bridge club expanded to 3 tables, and we developed a buddy system ensuring no senior attends medical appointments alone. Most surprisingly, several medical schools have invited me to speak to students about recognizing elder abuse and avoiding unconscious ageist bias in diagnoses. My experiences have become teaching tools for a new generation of physicians. The most valuable lesson from my experience is one I share with every senior who contacts our foundation. Documentation is your strongest defense. Keep detailed records of suspicious incidents. Date everything. Store copies with trusted friends. Isolation is their most powerful tool. Maintain connections with friends and community members who know your capabilities. Create witnesses to your competence through regular social engagement. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it likely is. Our generation was taught to doubt ourselves and defer to others. Reject that conditioning. Your lived experience has value. Most importantly, recognize that age discrimination often masquerades as concern. When someone makes decisions without your input for your own good, challenge them directly. Why do you feel I can't make that decision? What specific evidence suggests I need assistance? Your decades of experience represent wisdom, not weakness. You've navigated complex situations longer than many professionals have been alive. That perspective deserves respect, not dismissal. The greatest mistake my children made was assuming that age had diminished me. What they didn't realize was that each year had built something in me they couldn't see. A lifetime of careful observation, meticulous documentation, and the quiet strength that comes from weathering life's storms. I visit them sometimes, Diane and Warren. The minimum security facility allows monthly visits. They're serving their sentences in separate institutions, but I alternate months. They rarely speak during these visits, and neither has apologized. I go because I need to understand how the babies I once rocked to sleep became the adults who plotted my demise. I haven't found answers yet, but I continue to search. Perhaps that's the librarian in me, always seeking knowledge, even when it hurts. I still keep my journals, though now they record happier events, Emma's first words, Amanda's graduation, new friendships formed through the foundation. The Victorian house on Maplewick Drive remains my home, though now it's also headquarters for our growing elder advocacy network. We lost 2 children, but gained a community. And in that exchange, we found something precious, a purpose that transforms personal pain into collective strength. Last week, an 87-year-old woman called our hotline. Her son had begun claiming she was confused shortly after developers expressed interest in her farmland. We sent a volunteer to help her document the gaslighting attempts. She installed cameras in her home. 3 days later, she recorded her son and daughter-in-law discussing power of attorney and memory care facilities while she was supposedly napping. Now she's safe, her property secure, and her autonomy intact. When she called to thank us, she said something that has become our foundation's unofficial motto. They thought my age made me vulnerable. They never considered it made me formidable. Our work has expanded beyond legal assistance. We now offer technological training to help seniors protect themselves, teaching them to use recording devices, security cameras, and digital documentation methods. We partner with ethical financial advisors to create elder-specific plans that maintain autonomy while protecting assets. We're developing a network of medical professionals committed to combating ageism in healthcare settings. Most importantly, we're changing the narrative. Each story we share, each triumph of elderly wisdom over those who would exploit it helps reshape society's perception of aging. We're not helpless. We're not confused. We're not burdens. We are individuals with decades of accumulated knowledge, perspective, and resilience. Next month, I'm testifying before the state legislature in support of enhanced elder abuse protections. The law, if passed, would create stricter penalties for financial exploitation and establish better training for medical professionals to recognize signs of manufactured incompetence claims. They're calling it the Mildred Act. These stories of vindication happen every day in Victorian homes and modern apartments just like mine. If my journey from trusted mother to confused burden resonated with you, please hit like and share it with someone who might be facing similar whispered conversations behind closed doors. What would you have done in my position? Would you have confronted Diane when you first caught her lying about the stovetop kettle she herself helped pack away? Would you have trusted Dr. Jenkins despite decades of care? or recognized how easily medical professionals can be manipulated by adult children. Perhaps you'd have installed recording devices sooner, or confronted them directly instead of setting the insurance papers trap. Our generation wasn't raised to suspect our children of plotting against us. We were taught to believe family always acts in our best interest, that our sacrifices would be honoured, not exploited. But I didn't spend 33 years organising knowledge as a librarian to have my own story rewritten. I didn't meticulously document 6 decades of family history to have my competence erased for a development deal. Your daily medication routine isn't confusion, it's discipline. Your carefully organised financial records aren't obsession, they're protection. And your insistence on remaining in the home where you raised your family isn't stubbornness. It's your right. Subscribe to Her Silver Truth for more powerful stories of triumph, more proven strategies to protect your independence, and more wisdom from women who refuse to be silenced. Each video in our series offers new insights into preserving your dignity, securing your home, and ensuring your voice is heard. Remember that you matter. Your wisdom, your experience, and your dignity are worth fighting for, no matter how others try to diminish them. Be sure to check out the next video on screen for another journey of transformation. See you in the next video.